How about Jesus' parable of the talents? A man entrusted 3 of his workers with his wealth. The 2 who invested the money and made a profit were praised, and the one who buried his share so he wouldn't lose any of it was reprimanded.
Socialism is when you bury your money in the ground, apparently. Hello, everyone. Merry times to all. Happy Festivus, happy Crimbus, all those good things. To get myself and my viewers into a bit of the Christmas spirit, I figured I would cover a topic as old as time. Today, I'm going to try to answer the eternal question: was Jesus a member of the USSR? Much to think about. So to quickly summarize just kind of my feelings on the question, was Jesus a socialist, before we then, and I probably should have led with this, I'm going to react to a PragerU video. To me, the question at hand, the sort of burden of proof, is less about, is Jesus in favor of like a workers' state seizing control of private means of productions in favor of the working class? You know, like that's such a weird, very modern approach to economics that you're just not going to find him advocating for either privatization or publicization. Is that the word? So to me, it's less about, would Jesus be a card-carrying Communist Party member? And to me, it's more so about, is there a vague anti-capitalism that we can see in his teachings? And if any of you haven't happened to see it, here's your first chance to get a sense of my video.
Let's take a look together through Jesus' teachings to see if there's anything he said that rails so wildly against American neoliberalism that, were Jesus alive today, he'd get labeled a filthy commie. I want to hammer this point home early. Applying modern terms to historical figures can be a fool's errand. Because societies throughout history have such vastly different contexts and value systems, it's never a simple comparison. For this video, I'm going to simply define communist Jesus as anything that conservative Americans would label communism.
This is the burden of proof here, because of how, not even just American conservatives, I guess American neoliberals, the way that anything not trying to approach the lowest tax threshold, anything not actively advocating for privatization of every essential market. You know, like Obi-Wan said, only Siths deal in absolutes. The Sith of capitalists talk about communism and socialism as anything that is not like what Reagan was advocating for, anything that's not what the next conservative wave of economics is pushing for. So really, I think because of how American conservatives talk about this shit, they've set the bar here. They've set it at this very low level.
So if you want to blame someone for my expanded definition of communism in this video, maybe you should take that issue up with the folks who've held on to Red Scare tactics as a cheap rhetorical tool to attack anything they don't like for the better part of 80 years. A rich man tells Jesus he's been a good little boy, but Jesus says he's got to do one last thing before the rich man can get into heaven.
Sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven.
When the rich man hesitated to give up his wealth, Jesus exclaimed,
"It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God."
Well, shit, that's pretty cut and dry. I guess heaven's an official no rich people zone.
Which, by the way, I don't know if I actually go on to make this point in the original video. The idea of selling your possessions and giving to the poor is kind of, in its nature, contradictory to capitalism, the idea of which is that, you know, the economy is best served by rich people being able to make money and then continuing to make money. Like the idea of owning capital is that it scales upward. Like you make a good business venture on a small business, then you use that money to buy out a competitor, and then you expand your market like wider, into your county, into your state, nationwide, that sort of thing. But that endless upscaling kind of can't exist if you, as the business owner, are selling your possessions. And while you could argue that maybe you just have to be like a Bill Gates and, at least to his word, try to sell it all off at the end of your life, I think that's an interesting biblical question of, can you suddenly get into heaven if you're not following this rule for 90 years of your life, but on your final day when you die, you're like, okay, now I'm going to sell some of my possessions off. But yeah, there is kind of a fundamental disconnect here between telling people to give up their possessions and an economic system that is built around people having possessions to build off of.
Jumping to the modern day, if somebody told rich Christians that they needed to give up half their money to be holy, not just 10%, a threshold that many rich people don't even meet, they would absolutely call that person a communist. Oh, and don't even get Jesus started on what it would mean if rich people had to pay back folks they'd cheated.
This is your annual reminder that wage theft from employers vastly outweighs any other kind of theft. This is about 14 billion annually from burglary, robbery, auto theft, larceny. Minimum wage violations on its own is almost double the rest of theft. And if you add all this in together, that's 32, it's nearing 3 times as much money stolen by employers annually than petty theft. Is that the word? These might not be petty, but things that, you know, there's a lot of media coverage on this portion of the crime wave. I can't name a single video or article covering this portion of crime wave.
Some people take Jesus' stance on helping the poor as support for a tax-funded war on poverty, which is the part of the conversation where a conservative hops in and says, actually, Jesus advocated for charity, not taxes, which is where I jump into the conversation to remind folks it's difficult to map modern concepts onto historical moments.
I'll also take a second here to say, if we view Jesus's advocacy as results-based, by that I mean if he would be in favor of whichever system had the most results, what you'll find interesting is the relative amount of private charity in a country is largely unrelated to outcomes. By that I mean the countries that spend the least privately on charity programs have basically the same poverty-based outcomes, that is to say relative highness or lowness of poverty, as those who spend the most privately on charity, whereas public funds toward charity decrease poverty. That is to say, the more you spend publicly on anti-poverty, the less poverty you have. So if we assume Jesus is a pragmatist, then we can assume that he would be in favor of whichever system gets results, you know, and in this case it would seem to be publicly targeted programs rather than leaving it up to the chance of private charity.
Again, and I really can't stress this enough, Jesus and his boys pooled resources together like a fucking hippie commune. And for the record, this type of hippie-like communal approach would definitely be called impractical and commie-like today.
All right, folks, that is the point where I will cease watching this video. To the YouTube audience, if you haven't seen this video in full, I'll link it up above my head on screen. You can go check it out for yourself just to get the full experience of my commentary here. But yeah, in general, as I said throughout the video, I think the burden of proof kind of is very heavily on my side of the equation, because I don't think it's so much about like, would Jesus have, is he a union guy? You know, I don't think that's a question that really can have an answer. And moreover, I think it's just that that's a really lazy approach for conservatives, because it makes their side of the argument just like, oh, well, clearly he didn't advocate for a workers' state, so therefore he was a capitalist. Like, that's just, duh, that's an obvious answer. What's more interesting is whether or not he would be in favor of neoliberal capitalism is, I think, the point. So, with all that in mind, let's turn it on over to the PragerU video.
Was Jesus a socialist? Well, if socialism is nothing more than being kind to other people, then you might think the answer is yes.
And here we can see right off the bat, he's trying to ham-fist the argument into being in his favor, where it's like, he's doing the opposite of me, where he's, I'm assuming, about to give like a very rigid definition of socialism. He made a non-profit just for familiarizing people with free market economics. That's so funny, dude, that there's so much money behind stamping out any attempt to get away from free market economics. Like, it's already the dogma. It's already what rules our two-party system. You don't need the foundation of economic education to convince normies that free market economics is good. That's just kind of the default assumption of most Americans. So maybe that gives a sense of what this guy's position is and what kind of answer he's trying to ham-fist here. Oh, that's an interesting point, Joshua Novak. He wrote the book Private Cures for Public Ills, The Promise of Privatization. Yeah, where's his bias lie? And I do think it's really important to say real quick to any critics out there watching this. I went into that video and I still approach this question with open eyes. Like there was a portion early in the drafts where I was talking about that he was sort of a what we might call a civil rights communist, you know. But I got to the point in my research where I was like, yeah, I don't actually think that's true. So I cut that section and added that little amendment at the top. And like I've said multiple times over, I do not think there's evidence in the Bible that he would advocate for public ownership of the means of production or things like that, you know. I concede that that part of the argument is not present in the Bible. Basically, I'm trying to say I'm more intellectually honest than the economic freedom motherfucker.
But you can be kind to other people and be a capitalist. Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have given away millions too.
Yes, Bill Gates, famous for using his money for all of the best things, not at all to monopolize, water and medical resources in Africa. His philanthropy is all for the good. And again, like I said when I was rewatching my video, can it be said that one is holy if they wait till the end of their life to give away all their money? Like, had Bill Gates given away his first billion the second he had it, we could argue that that's maybe more charitable, but again, it kind of goes against the sort of upscaling of a capitalist to give money away so wholly, because then you don't have any more money to continue growing.
To get an accurate answer to our question, we need to define socialism. Socialism is the concentration of power into the hands of government elites.
Socialism is when the government does stuff. And it's more socialism the more stuff it does. And if it does a real lot of stuff, it's communism.
Right off the bat, that is how you know that this guy with a very clear bias is not intellectually interested in the nuances of economic systems. Because the minute you say that socialism is, rather than socialism can involve concentration of power into the government, that's how you know they're either not well-read or not interested in delivering the nuance. For example, there are plenty of movements throughout socialism's history that are worker-based. You know, there's syndicalism was a big part of the American labor movement in the New Deal era. And to my understanding, the Republicans in the Spanish Civil War were more on the anarchist or syndicalist side of things. Now that movement wasn't successful for reasons that I'm not too familiar with and we can get into on another day, but that doesn't mean that socialism cannot exist in a like worker state kind of function, you know? It is true that most socialist experiments have been to use the power of the state to attempt to concentrate power to then attempt to give it back over to the people. But that doesn't mean that's how it has to be, you know, and certainly plenty of socialists would disagree.
Central planning of the economy and the radical redistribution of wealth. Jesus never called for any of that.
Again, here we go. This is like the like dark link version of my video where he is using the most stringent definition of socialist to say, well, Jesus clearly didn't call Xi Jinping based and pog-pilled, so therefore he wasn't a commie. It's just stacking the deck in their favor to have the most obvious answer ever.
Nowhere in the New Testament does he advocate for the government to punish the rich or even to use tax money to help the poor.
Let's ignore the fact that he calls rich people evil and says that their barrier to being holy and spending the afterlife with him is their wealth. He didn't say the government should do it, so therefore he's totally okay with rich people.
Nor does he promote the ideas of state ownership of businesses or central planning of the economy.
Jesus Christ, he's literally, oh my God, he's doing everything I said is stupid and intellectually dishonest, just unironically.
In Luke 12, Jesus is confronted by a man who wants him to redistribute wealth. Master, the man says to Jesus, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me.
Are they really about to use a private family affair as an analog for the state redistributing the means of production. Oh, this is everything I'd hoped and more. Okay, real quick, I'm gonna pull up this story just to sort of fact check, what was it, Luke 12. Luke chapter 12, someone in the crowd said to him, "Hey, teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or arbiter between you?" Then he said, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist." Oh my God, literally in the Bible verse they're citing, life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Again, we're back to that core thing of like, a capitalist is defined by their ability to have an abundance of possessions to further stack up an even higher abundance of possessions. In the fucking stupid verse they cite and try to misrepresent, it defeats their own argument, kind of. Jesus.
How about Jesus' parable of the talents? Talents were a form of money in Jesus' day. A man entrusted 3 of his workers with his wealth. The 2 who invested the money and made a profit were praised, and the one who buried his share so he wouldn't lose any of it was reprimanded.
Socialism is when you bury your money in the ground, apparently. Like, investment doesn't have to come privately just because it's, you know, the parable's got these 2 guys that reinvest their money. Like, that doesn't argue against a state collecting tax money to invest in things.
Jesus was warning us not to put acquisition of money and material possessions above our spiritual and moral lives.
So what does that say about an economic system whose whole fucking point is acquiring money, for individuals to acquire money to then reinvest to acquire more money? Like, even if you think that that's a good way to organize an economy and a good way for the betterment of, you know, human life, your economic system is encouraging the thing you're arguing is bad.
Jesus advises us to be of generous spirit, to show kindness, to assist the widow, and
this is a really interesting straw man here. Advises us to do all of these things. Again, no, shush, Lawrence. He directly calls for giving up your possessions, okay? Advises is a very passive word here. He had very active language when he talked about giving away his possessions.
But he clearly means this to be our responsibility, not the government's.
Where? Where is that clear? How is that clear? He doesn't talk about government because our understanding of government was different. What the? Oh, this guy's making me so fucking mad.
Consider Jesus' Good Samaritan story. A traveler comes upon a man at the side of a road. The man had been beaten and robbed and left half dead.
Notice how Jesus doesn't say that the National Guard should come in and help this guy. Clearly, this man wasn't a socialist.
Jesus never endorsed the forced redistribution of wealth.
Because nobody at the time did. It wasn't a part of economic conversations in fucking, well, I was about to say BC, but it is literally AD. Yeah, 15 AD, 25 AD, none of it. Nobody was talking about it.
That idea is rooted in envy, something that he and the 10th of the 10 Commandments railed against.
It's such a stupid straw. I love that anti-socialist straw man, that you're just jealous.
Most importantly, Jesus cared about helping the less fortunate. He never would have approved anything that undermines wealth creation. And the only thing that has ever created wealth and lifted masses of people out of poverty is free market capitalism.
Small business king, Jesus Christ.
Read the New Testament. The plain meaning of the text is loud and clear. Jesus was not a socialist. He couldn't be. He loved people, not the state.
You know, most files uploaded to YouTube are, you know, at its base, it's a set of code transcribed into a video format. But apparently, PragerU broke ground, technologically advanced the world with this video, because this whole segment is just made out of straw. It's really an accomplishment. I gotta tip my cap to him on that one. So yeah, that's it for this video, everybody. I hope it's clear. Again, as I literally argued against in my video, the framework of to be a socialist means you have to advocate for seizing the means of production, is the laziest way to approach this question. It's the most intellectually dishonest. It's the definition you use if you want to arbitrarily say that Jesus was a capitalist. If you're interested in teasing apart the topic more broadly, you would go my route. Hope you enjoyed it. Now, let's turn it on over to the pre-recorded outro, Piley.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to toss me a like and subscribe down below. But if you really want to help me out, you can join me over on Patreon. Patrons get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes content, like early versions of every video, and exclusive Patreon-only videos. Plus, if you join the Piley Benton's Biggest Boys tier, you get your name read off at the end of every video, which I am about to do once I pull up the names. Zoth, Revo Pregame, Emily, Kyle Foley, Jennifer Jones, Caffeine Unicorn, Goblin of the Year, Stockwell Homestead, Nillik Elites, and Cameron Fordo. So if you want to hear your lovely name read off at the end of every video, be sure to join me on this specific tier. Thanks much, everyone, and I'll see you next time.